Afternoon. It's great to be here and to address you. I notice some of you have moved back to the back of the audience, but I hope you can hear me, and generally people can. I'm just going to talk about, and I know there's a different title on your sheet that you got in relation to the conference, but what I want to talk about is the present and the future of the group water scheme sector. And I spoke at ULA a few years ago, so most of the people involved in the energy project are aware of the group water scheme sector, the history. So I suppose you'd be interested maybe in where we've come in the past few years even, since then. So essentially we're talking about 365 privately sourced group water schemes, schemes that abstract their own water, treat it, and then distribute it in the, along obviously a distribution network, some of which are very long. Ballycroy, for instance, out towards Erris there in West Meath has 120 miles of continuous pipeline, and I'm sure that Jerry Ty and some of the other group scheme people here have similarly very, very extensive networks. In addition to that, we have hundreds more of what are called publicly sourced group water schemes, schemes that provided their water through Irish Water at a bulk meter or a reservoir or whatever. I understood just from yesterday, we were talking, Conrad was saying that in Mayo, for instance, there are 200 group schemes in total, 113, I think he said, of which are publicly sourced group water schemes. But my talk is going to focus on the privately sourced, because really that's where the future is. The publicly sourced schemes, it's difficult to see their future until we're much, much more certain about the relationship between Irish Water and charge and one thing and another. So my talk will be exclusively on the privately sourced group water scheme sector. And it's a sector that very, very little is known about, certainly in the corridors of media in Dublin and that there. They think that some people up there think that people still go to the well with the bucket and bring it home, that's a group water scheme essentially. So a few months ago the EPA published for the first time its drinking water report for private water supplies. It distinguished private water supplies including group water schemes. So we were contacted by RTE for one of their prime journalists to go. He wanted to go and actually visit a group water scheme. So, oh gosh, what the hell am I going with this? This doodle. Is it me? There you go. So here we are. George Lee came to town, down from RTE, to actually visit a group water scheme, and he didn't know what he was going to find. So we came down to a scheme called Mid-Roscommon Group Water Scheme, which is an amalgamation of quite a few small rural supplies in that area, all of which were deficient in water quality, all of which came together, and all of which now have a state-of-the-art treatment plant managed by a DBO operator and with their own manager in place, a local manager in place as well. And I think they were actually blown away with the professionalism that they saw in the sector, and indeed it was covered that evening in the news. They showed this footage so it showed how far we'd come, particularly if you think of a county like Roscommon, which is almost renowned now for cryptosporidium and water quality issues, that there we have essentially resolved. We had no exceedances whatsoever in the group water scheme sector in Roscommon in recent times, and that's since the upgrading of the final plant in the county, Polecat Springs, which there's a representative here. So that job of coming from a very low base to where we are now has been a particularly interesting journey around community, and how community and the official authorities, and indeed Earl mentioned it there, the group water schemes could not have done this on their own. This is a story of the successive partnership between the community sector, the local government sector, and in particular the people with the purse strings up in Leinster House, the Department of Housing as it is now, the Department of the Environment as we would call it. Of course, we could have brought George Lee to another group water scheme, and this is Lyra in North Clare, not far from Father Ted's house, and it might just reflect maybe that more typical view of quite a few group water community supplies that are still back there in the early days, when the objective was to get the water up and get it through a distribution network to homes. And there wasn't really as much thought in the long run as to the quality of the water, although there was care taken in choosing the best possible site in an area. But obviously, this is in need of a wee bit of TLC, or maybe a wee bit more. So we have quite a few still of schemes like that the answer hasn't been quite there, but we are working still with communities like that to bring them along. So that's what I'm going to talk about, the journey for these schemes in particular. No. So, over the past, since about 2001, 2002, when the European Court ruled against Ireland Inc. because of non-compliance in the group water scheme sector, arising directly out of a case of a complaint in Ballycroy group water scheme, I should say, there's been almost 1.9 billion spent in that period, and we've got great results out of that. This is a group water scheme in Connemara over at Rainville. This is Tullyloch, and this is Clun Lowan group water scheme, which uses ozone treatment, a difficult source. Obviously, getting more difficult as climate change and the whole issue of organics in water, you know, trying to cope with all those. So without this scheme, this community really couldn't have existed, couldn't exist. And that's the important, group water schemes, if you like, were the lifeblood of rural communities. And an awful lot of parts of the country where you couldn't get a well easily, there simply would be nobody living in them, but for the efforts of schemes like this here. So this is the money that was spent between those years, and we're not finished yet. So in addition to that financial investment, a huge part of what we call the Rural Water Programme that began in 1998, a huge part of that was the investment in people too. So our function as a federation, the federation was only set up in that period, in 1997 actually, here in County Mayo, if I'm correct. So we're in our 20th anniversary. So our function as a federation was to liaise. This is Barry, Dean, Karen, Joe and Jean. Each of these includes one of our development officers out meeting with group water scheme people on the ground. In this case, Barry was bringing a non-compliant scheme in North Cork to a very good scheme elsewhere in Cork, so that they could see what can be done. It's what Sean Cushula referred to as demonstration projects almost. It's along the lines, if you like, of the farmers, the model farms, you know. So we try to bring schemes that are in not such good situations to schemes that are. And here, for instance, Joe was down in a wee scheme called Bulgadon. It's in County Limerick. And their issue was to sort out financial matters. So there he's sitting with the treasurer of the scheme in her kitchen, working through the financial thing. And we developed a financial planner for schemes so that they know exactly what their costs are in the course of the year, and then they can plan their charging policies or whatever. And we have, this is a manager of a scheme in Monaghan, again showing residual chlorine monitoring up at the reservoir site. And this is another wee scheme in County Galway that Karen was visiting. So that investment in people has been hugely important, because you could throw money at communities, but if you don't invest in mentoring and bringing people along with you, and improving their capacity to manage in particular. If you don't do that, you might as well go out and throw your money into a shuck, because it's going to be no good. You're not going to get the return out of the investment. So the people things you do, and I have to say, all of these people that you're looking at in these photographs, bar Henry here making a few pounds, but these are voluntary committees. You know, so it's a huge undertaking on their behalf. So towards sustainable, and that word again, Sean Cushula mentioned it, and it is of course the key word in everything we do at community level. So it's sustainable solutions and safe rural water supply. So as part of that there, and I'll go through each of them in turn then, we're looking about targeted investment. That we target the investment sensibly and appropriately, that we'll get the long return, and that we can protect that investment. Then building viable entities with paid management, because a lot of our group water schemes simply aren't viable. They're not viable. They cannot continue the way they are. So how are we going to address that issue? And then quality assurance implementation is absolutely key. We developed a quality assurance program back, and it was actually Dr. Jerry Cowley here, who was on the board, the head of the board of the Federation, Jerry Cowley here from this parish, if you like, who actually suggested that we put quality assurance procedures into place. We did that. many, many years ago, and quality assurance is now at the heart of what group water schemes need to be doing. And that includes focus on the source, on the abstraction, on the treatment facilities themselves, and then managing of the water in the distribution network. And of course, it's all no good if nobody's keeping a record, because Lyra or anybody from Mayo County Council at any time can go and visit a group water scheme and they have to see the records. They can't take your word for it. They have to see evidence of proper management. So, focused mentoring and training will continue to be a huge part of our action, and this is one that we're particularly proud of that we're developing in, and that's our education program through schools. And I did mention how that was developing back in Ula a few years ago. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that. So, targeted investment. The multi-annual program. Now we have a program that's stretched over several years. So the available funding from now on is going to be allocated on a priority basis. It's not going to be a matter of a scheme well deciding which we'd like to throw in to get a few pound. If it's out there, let's get a few pound. This is going to be much, much more targeted on priorities. And what's been introduced, and we did introduce one ourselves a few years ago, and now the department is taking this on board. They're introducing a remedial action list approach, which is absolutely sensible in our view. Look for the real problem and let's sort them out. You know, try and identify them. So now we have a categorization of schemes that need to be approached. And there'll be a plan there, as there is in the public side, of remedial measures to get those on course. We also need an expert panel, or there is an expert panel now, outside of the group water scheme sector, that's evaluating proposals submitted to local authorities, including around the whole issue of amalgamation, rationalisation, along areas like that there. And their reports are excellent, because the first time they're actually telling us, well, why particular projects aren't being supported. So you know, it's very much full of great information. And evidence-based. If I can give an example, now in the rural water side, you won't get state funding or support towards replacing a pipeline unless you show it needs to be replaced. You certainly won't get it for a new reservoir if you have water pushing out of your pipes and you're losing a lot of it. They will say, well, go and see if put in the meters and that there and try and reduce the demand. So it's evidence-based investment is the key. So, should the target investment be conditional? Well, it certainly will be. And some of the conditions that should be considered: is the proposed solution appropriate? Sometimes solutions are foisted onto a community that isn't capable of managing it. So it's very important if you go out, for instance, that previous slide, you might have noticed, I don't know if we can go backwards in the show, but if you notice, that wasn't actually the nicest looking pump house, but there was an investment in the rural water programme in that pump house as early as 2007. That's only 10 years ago, and yet it was in that state. So will there be professional oversight? Who's looking to see that things are actually, that the investment is protected and that things are being run right? So we would see the solution being matched to the capacity of the community, the willingness of that community to put a management system in place, professional management, because we're talking about a food product here, and people can get very sick if it's not right. And then, is there a case to be made for amalgamation or rationalisation with other schemes? And we would argue definitively there is, and I'll explain why. This is the number of schemes we have, the numbers under each category of those roughly 365 schemes. So these are the schemes. Only 19% of them have more than 300 households. Only 19%. For the 21% have over 100, between 100 and 300. So we're talking about, what? We're talking 40% in total. So that means that 60% of the group water scheme sector, the community-owned water supplies, are less, up to 100 households. But it gets even more interesting once you grind that down. And here we go. Almost half of all group water schemes have less than up to 60 households. Up to 60 households. And these are food production facilities, you know, and when you get down to that level, this is primarily where the problems are. All of the non-compliances, the microbiological non-compliances in E. coli last year were in this category, this lower category, maybe a couple in this one here. But they're at the lower, the smaller the scheme, the more likely the problem. So, what we've established are some demonstration projects to look at the whole area of physical amalgamation and managerial rationalisation. So we've 2 of these projects going on. One in County Offaly, where Chlorine Group Water Scheme and Ahan Con Small Wee Scheme is being linked into chlorine. So this here involves the construction of 1,500 metres of interconnecting mains and the decommission of the Ahan Con source, which was problematic and has been. It's a heavy agricultural land. In Limerick then, we talked about a rationalisation project of these 3 schemes, and indeed our development officer now in County Limerick, who actually used to be development officer in Mayo, Joe Gallagher, is considering another scheme out in West Limerick that may join into this rationalisation at a further point. That's Barna Glendara. So this is the area above Ahan Con Chlorine. So this is the chlorine pipework coming up to here. This there is the Ahan Con pipework over here. So it's a very simple interconnecting pipe, 1,500 metres. Problem sorted. Chlorine's a good scheme and very, very well managed. Good active community committee. And as part of this rationalisation, they'll be putting a manager in place. At the moment, both schemes are managed through purely voluntary effort. So there will be a manager put in place to oversee the water supply in that area. This then is the Limerick thing, and you can see there's a bit of a distance down here to Killeedy, but it doesn't matter. We can't run a pipe all that way. But what we can do is ensure that there are economy of scale, that we have one insurance policy. They will now create a single co-op between these 3 group water schemes so that they are beginning to save their money in terms of their investment programme. And it's just going to be great. So this project, we want to move this along fairly quickly, and we think the department is certainly coming on board with it. So this just gives you an area around Tipperary and Kilkenny. And this is the number of schemes we have, quite a few, and the virtually all these small little schemes in that area. All little, there would have been the early group water schemes, all direct pump borehole schemes primarily. Some would be springs, no lake sources here at all. So we're looking at those clusters. So we're out now at the minute, our development officers are out meeting these schemes and getting general agreement about these all coming together. So that's where we're moving now, into this area, either rationalised management in these here, and there is a potential for pipeline amalgamation in many cases. So we're reducing the number of schemes at the same time. So next we move on then to that quality assurance area, which we're so passionate about, I suppose, because we see the value of it. And here, the ZOC, we put a proposal to the department through the National Rural Water Services Committee that we can't go out and talk to farmers or householders about protecting the source as some kind of a vague notion. We decided the first step in building a source protection plan or a source protection strategy is actually to know where the water is coming from, the catchment. Understand your catchment. So here's the well. And once you understand the catchment, you can then delineate or show the areas of greatest risk. So that's what the ZOC delineation project, and we're well on the way to completing this here on all group water scheme sources. So we're miles ahead of Irish Water in that regard, in terms of focusing on the source. I'm not boasting there. So the groundwater, so it's not just that. It doesn't just come with this map. It comes with an actual poster that makes recommendations, that describes what they're seeing. And we do it as far as possible, and we have Alec up here next, and Alex has been working on the surface water supplies in the group water scheme sector. Similarly, mapping the hydrology. And from that, once you've it mapped, you can go to doors and you can say, well, look at here. If you spread in this particular area, if you put a septic tank into this particular area, you can be quite sure there's a risk of it ending up in our water supply. So it gives you a much clearer approach in making a case to householders. This is a good example. This is Ballybroad or Ballycallan, just on the borders of Westmeath and Offaly. Small scheme, but this is the delineated catchment. Here's the well. So now we know where the potential risk is in these number of fields. We don't have to worry about out here. We don't have to worry about, under the nitrates directive, there should be no activity up here either. But now we've shown when actually activity up here doesn't make a ball of blue. This is the area we're going to focus on. And within that area, there'll be areas of greater risk and lesser risk. Sometimes it'll be okay to do stuff. So what we also did then was, within that now, we're putting in households. So this is one of the schemes that Alec did. This is Erne Valley. Oh no, it's not. It's the one down in County Clare. It's Ballincullenan Lake, which is the source for tuna dysart. So here, it's a much bigger catchment, obviously, in a surface water supply. So all of the households have been mapped. And now, direct contact has been made with those households in relation to their septic tanks. Because, of course, we're on the edge of the karst zone. This is vulnerability. And septic tanks are going to contribute significantly to pressures on Ballincullenan Lake. So now that contact being made with all of those, we can bring them on board as understanding, well, why me? Now you, because you're here, you're in the catchment. You need to think about how you approach stuff like land spreading and stuff like the desludging of your septic tank, whatever it is. So I think that has been a major plus to us, and we're working away on that. The abstraction point thing, well, it's self-evident. If you don't protect the abstraction point, this is where most of the problems on water supplies happen. Poorly constructed and purely protected abstraction points. And here's one here. It's a borehole supply, which was flooding, and of course all the surface water and all the crap that's in it is going straight down into the well. And that we found this on lots and lots of things. So very little investment here might actually solve the entire problem of their microbiological exceedances in their raw water supply. So we think that there hasn't been nearly enough focus. You know, it's a food product, and yet there hasn't been nearly enough focus on the simple issue of hygiene. Right? And we really think that hygiene and maintaining high hygienic standards is that. This is a little scheme in Cork called Watersound in the Cove of Cork. Absolutely lovely. 2 boreholes, site fenced off, very well maintained without using herbicides, thankfully, and a very neat treatment plant. You could eat your dinner off the floor, essentially, and that's the way that we need to be moving towards that there. Regardless of the treatment system, we know that it's a safe working environment, a safe food production environment. Like, if you go into a restaurant, you would like to think that the kitchen is maintained to this standard. Why not the same in a water production facility? So we're also demand management and the clean and agriculture. Well, the schemes have been absolutely brilliant on this one here, demand management. It's been phenomenal. The group water scheme sector has reduced through metering, through bulk metering, and through individual metering on virtually all group water schemes. They have reduced the supply of water, and as a result, in schemes in Mayo, for instance, in West Mayo, we're losing 80% of the water. 80% of the water. That has been pulled right down, and now we have some small schemes that are as tight as a drum. They know when someone gets up in the night to flush the toilet. That's how tightly managed they are. You know, the bigger schemes, they'd be happy. Now in the group water scheme sector, they would be unhappy, certainly, if they were over 15%. They know there's still much more to be done. 15% unaccounted for water. So it's all time pulling it back. The cleaning of pipes is another issue, and particularly for large schemes with lake sources. Because over the years, there was no filtration. There was a bit of chlorine shoveled in now and again, but there was no filtration. So a lot of that stuff became embedded in pipes. So here's a scheme, the biggest in Ireland, Kilmaley, a few months ago, and it brought in this new technology called ice pigging. Ice pigging, where slush ice is pushed down into the distribution main. It is a fantastic way of cleaning the pipe. Unfortunately, it's a bit expensive at the minute because the lorry has to be brought over from England to do the job. But as a technology, it's definitely working, because if you don't do this here, the water supply isn't safe, and a lot of schemes that this scale of scheme loses an awful lot of its residual disinfectant along the distribution network because it's in there being taken up by this embedded dirt. So that's a major focus of the group scheme. And again, as I said, it doesn't matter if you're doing all the work if you don't keep records. So keeping records is now part and parcel of what we'd expect on any well-run group water scheme. It mightn't be just as tidy as that office, but you'd hope it wouldn't be far off. And it just makes everything in its place, and a place for everything. Means that if Conrad or his staff from Mayo County Council do an audit on a scheme, and they do audits, they go in, they can see they have the evidence there. It's all there for them to go in. It's just the only way to go. So we continue to focus on the mentoring and training. And part of that mentoring, as I said, is bringing schemes together, because the shared knowledge that's out there in the community-run group water scheme sector is absolutely enormous. So we bring schemes to a scheme like this here, is Ballinagar in County Offaly, and they see Ballinagar would be in our top 5 schemes in the country, kind of in terms of its management processes and just how it's developed over the years. So we bring schemes to Ballinagar to show them. And in addition to that, we've a range of training courses, one, to up the capacity, and secondly, in conjunction with the Water Services training group, to provide more practical training courses around things like leak detection or whatever, network management. So this is our Educating Communities Through Schools project, which has, as I said, we developed several years ago as part of the National Source Protection Pilot Project, which we ran in conjunction with Dundalk IT. And out of that we developed a course book all about water, and we've been supplying that to through schemes to schools, free gratis to primary schools around the country. And it was very well received. But the course book on its own, teachers are already overloaded. You know, they really don't have time for the additional stuff. So now what we've been doing is, and we plan to do more of it, is going into the scheme. It's a kind of a payback to schemes as well, where one of us will go in, and the scheme will be the local link with the local primary school, and we bring generally the 6th class, 5th class, some small wee rural schools, you bring in 4th class, 3rd class as well, and of course we make sure there's parents and all that, and we bring them on a tour of the scheme. And we talk about their scheme. We talk about where the water is coming from to their source. And we let them see it. And we let them get down close and personal to the management of that scheme, because we make sure on the way back they take part in the scour of a pipeline. They open the pipeline. The children do. They come up. They're queuing up to do it. Learning by doing. Learning by doing. We then go back to the school, and we have about a 40-minute presentation around Tauachtanishka, the importance of water. The importance of water, that they begin to think in a way that Irish adults are no longer thinking, that this is an important resource that deserves to be protected and deserves to be treated with due deference. But so here we are in the scheme Tuna Dysart, and it has gone down really well. Never mind the bottles of water, we didn't bring those. Huh? But what we do is we finish the course. At the end of the course, we give a project, and the local scheme puts up prizes. And the project is quite simply, what water means to you. And they go away in the months to do it. The teacher, as long as they can do it in art class, if they're gifted at drawing or painting, they could do it as an essay, they could do it as a project work, building around their local group water scheme. And it's an idea that actually arose from a project that we launched in Kilmena here. Oh, Kilmena, just up the road here, several years ago when Sean Corrigan was there as manager. It was a fantastic project. So we thought, well, there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. We have done it, and Kilmena is the standard about how you energise communities around water. When we began it began with a simple survey. What did people know about their local water supply? 60% of people knew nothing, cared less. Right? At the end of the project, it went out, virtually 100% people understood their scheme, and more than that, they valued it. So that was the change in the space of that particular project. So we're building on that there, and working with other agencies. We'd love to hand it over. We'd love to have handed this over to Antashka or some other funded agency to take it from us, but they weren't really interested, to be honest. So we're kind of doing it ourselves with the local schemes and with the local authorities in some areas, particularly at the moment in County Tipperary. So that brings us on to sustainable schemes. And if I told you that in group water supplies, and I did a little wee poll survey before I was coming here to talk, and in some of these smaller schemes, energy costs constitute 25 to 33% of their operation costs. That's quite a big outlay. And yet, it's an area with thousands of miles of network, lots of hills in between, and a huge potential, you would imagine, for creating energy. And yet energy is the biggest outgoing, apart from, on small schemes, maybe monitoring costs, which we hope to take off them shortly. But anyway, this is the only scheme that I know in the country. This is Blakestown, Brittonstown in County Wicklow, a remote site. So they set up a little wind generator, and this was the building of a solar panel as well. Unfortunately, the farmer wouldn't let them put the wind generator anywhere else. Just shows the importance of planning, careful planning. And the farmer wouldn't let them put the generator where the actual wind is. So, so I'm afraid that's been a bit of a false start. And the problem, the solar has worked well, but they said that they would have benefited with a moving, a panel that moved with the sun. But it gave them daylight hours. But the problem was it was charging battery packs inside, and the energy coming in from the sun was actually too much for the battery packs. So now they're re-evaluating the whole thing and trying to get it more consistent. A more consistent solution for themselves. But obviously that's not answering their nighttime demand very well. So there is a project, and again we talked about this potential maybe in the pipeline, and we've had people come to us, academics, over the past 10, 12 years with these ideas of generating power within rising mains of group water streams. And we always think, yes, this is a perfectly great idea, but then we hear nothing back. They're generally academic studies, I suppose, and we don't hear anything back. But at the moment, there's one called Dwyer Ishka, which is a Welsh Bangor University and Trinity College Dublin. And it's working with 10 group water schemes in the southeast around investigating the capacity of replacing these. This is a pressure reducing valve. And putting in, this is where you have schemes with very, very high pressure, just to reduce that pressure, or else it might blow the tap off on the consumer at the household. So instead of replacing these with a micro turbo that will generate power for local community use or back to the scheme for a hall or whatever. So and it makes perfect sense because it does exactly, the micro turbo apparently does the same job as the PRV. So it's a win-win situation. You're generating power. Now I don't know if it's a goer, but hopefully from this here we'll see, there's a saying in Irish, na habere gene. Don't talk about it, do it. We'd love to see a lot more demonstration projects, a lot more actually results than investigations. We want to get to the point, because I think schemes would be interested, and there's quite a few group water scheme managers and personnel in here, and I'm sure if they saw potential to reduce the costs of managing their schemes by that amount, by huge amounts, by taking out that massive electricity bill, and electricity is the single biggest cost in any water supply. If you take that out, or if you reduce that substantially, I think that's a winner for everybody. So that's it. There is one scheme, and Ruth mentioned it, there is one scheme that's working with Sustainable Energy Ireland, and that's Polecat Springs, one of our schemes in County Roscommon, and we have the manager of the scheme here, Anthony Lee, and their plan is they've got a 0.8 hectare site, and they want to set up a solar an energy station at the site, and to use that for the benefit of the community. In addition, they have secured agreement from their DBO operator, in other words, the company that manages their treatment plant, that the bill to them, the fixed cost, will be reduced by the amount of electricity that they can supply to them. So you need that. You'd obviously need that agreement as well. Otherwise, some of them might actually charge you more for taking off their electricity bill. I don't know. But that's the way we need to be thinking. Because, and it was Sean O'Cushel said it there, that this is all changing. There is so much happening, there's so much potential out there, but we need to move beyond potential to actually getting results.